Hi, and welcome back to The Inner. Today I have with me special guest, Mike Parsons.
Hi, nice to be with
Hi,
you.
Mike. Hi. If you could, introduce yourself.
Okay, obviously I'm Mike. I live in the UK in the southwest of England. Come from a fairly traditional church background, but have ended up in a much more mystical place, I guess, with God. Um, but yeah, most of my time is spent online mentoring people, doing online sessions with people, and doing group sessions or one-on-ones in a mentoring people to hear God and to be able to engage with God in a more intimate way.
That's great. Now, Mike, it's an honor to have you on. Um, One of my favorite people. If you could somewhat summarize as best as you can your journey from transitioning to, I guess, where you started to where you are now.
Okay. Well, I started in a very traditional setting, brought up in a Methodist church from very young age, went to Sunday school when I was about two. And from that place, I guess, eventually in my teenage years, sort of went into a Brethren church, not really because of the theology, but because of a girl. So, usual thing, chasing a girl. But I spent a number of years there, and I guess was programmed quite a lot in sort of an evangelical sense in that place. While I was there in the mid 80s, I got baptized in the Spirit after a long search for something deeper with God, and eventually got baptized in the Spirit. And I was involved in youth work and organizing most of the youth work and stuff like that. But after a while, God gave me freedom to leave because they just weren't moving in the direction that God was taking me, I guess, and then left there. Connected with some small groups of people, and then eventually planted a church in the early 90s, and then moved up into the next county in England, Devon, about 100 miles away, and planted another church, which is where I've been since 1994. And that church was based on Isaiah 61. And the Spirit of the Sovereign Lord's upon me, preaching good news to the poor, binding up the brokenhearted, setting the captives free, preaching good news to those in prisons and that type of thing. And we ended up ministering to people with addictions, and we run a day center. We've got 60 beds of accommodation. We've been running a rehabilitation unit on a therapeutic community basis. So that was a whole different area in my life. In the early 90s, I established those ministries. I'm a sort of a bit of I guess a visionary, so I see things and then do them and then pass them over to other people to carry on with. So I established a ministry in Uganda, in Africa, with vocational training for AIDS orphans and things like that. So I've done quite a few things like that, but always been very open to the Holy Spirit and for the leading of the Spirit. So I've been involved in quite a number of moves of God. In 1993, we had a move of God very similar to what happened in Toronto, but it happened with us the year before. And that is what really took me to move to where I have lived since 1994. And outwork that there. So we had a number of moves of God. We had once where we had revival meetings every night for like 4 months and things like that. But I knew there was more than that, and my heart was hungry for something of a more of a reality with God. It's great having meetings, and it's great having times where God moves, and people get touched by God, and the power of God is present. But what about everyday life? And people can go to meetings and they can seek the experience, but where is their relationship with God? And so probably around 2005, God first started to talk to me about meditation and hearing his voice. And I didn't really have a grid for that, but I just went for it and started to meditate in a simple way of thinking about focusing my attention on God or a Bible verse or something like that. And God taught me to hear his voice, and I learned how to converse with him and have conversations with him. And that then led on into, okay, I can hear God speak to me through the Bible. I can hear God speak to me when I ask him questions, but what about conversation? So I just decided to think, well, okay, Jesus is with me. So I pictured him being in the chair opposite me, and I just started to talk to him, and he started to talk back, and we had this conversation. And then I started journaling the conversations, and that carried on for many, many years. And then it went on to another phase of being able to see more in a visionary way. And again, that was a God called me into that. I went to a conference, nothing to do with anything in the spirit at all. It was all to do with setting up social businesses to help what we were doing. And this guy said, I want you to close your eyes. I want to teach you how to see in the spirit. And I was like, well, I didn't want that. You know, I came for social entrepreneurship. And it's like, why are you trying to give me that stuff? But then God spoke to me and said, well, I did it just for you. And he said, close your eyes, picture a beach. Well, I was brought up in a seaside town with 5 beaches. I had a favorite beach. And I closed my eyes and I saw a beach, and I saw walking on the beach. I felt like I was there in the story. And then I went up to the edge of the water. And then he said, look over to the right, and there's someone walking towards you. And it was Jesus. And, you know, and I saw him. We had a conversation. He knelt down and drew something in the sand, and it said, I love you. And that opened up the door then to a more visual side of things. So then I went back again, starting with the Bible, and started to visualize the things that I read, and ended up in the story and was almost peering in on what was happening. Particularly, you know, there was one occasion where Jesus was talking to his disciples on the hillside and teaching them. And I started to picture that and think about it and meditate around it. And then I found myself there watching. And then he looked at me, and I was really shocked because he looked right in my eye, and he then spoke to me. And I thought, wow, this is going further than I, you know, thought was possible really at that point. And then things went on, and again, more moves of the spirit. And I was involved in a move in the spirit, and I think it was in 2008. And I think it was the same sort of time that they had the Lakeland revival meetings in Florida. And I was at my desk. We were doing a prophetic workshop because we were having a lot of visions. A lot of people were seeing things. So I was doing this prophetic workshop. I was at my desk, just thinking about the evening. Everyone else had gone home. And all of a sudden, it's like a portal opened up in my desk, and I'm sucked into this portal. I'm somewhere else, completely somewhere else. You know, I don't know whether it's physically, but in the spirit, my soul, I was somewhere else. And I was by this river of fire, and there were these steps. And I thought, okay, in Daniel, it says the river of fire flows from the throne of God. So I thought, oh, the throne of God must be here. Where is it? And I looked up, and I could just about picture and see an outline of light and glory, but I couldn't get there. But then I saw these steps, and I now know these steps are what called firestones. In Ezekiel 18, it talks about the firestones which are in Eden, the garden of God. So I took a step, and I stepped onto the first step, and it literally, I became immersed. It was like I was fused with the step, and it was love. And this love was an emotional experience which went deeper than anything I'd ever experienced before. And I, you know, cut a long story short, you know, eventually I went on all of the steps. It was love and joy and peace, but it was at a level of emotion and experience that I'd never, ever thought possible. And eventually I got to the top, and I fell on my face. I couldn't even look at the throne of God, but I was aware that the Father was there and Jesus was next to him. And then I thought, oh, maybe this is where I'm seated in heavenly places with him. So I looked off to the left, and there was all these thrones. And I thought, oh, I wonder if I have a throne there. So I crawled off, and then eventually I got up and I walked until I found this throne that just felt like it was mine. And it had a name on it, which wasn't Mike, but it had a name that I resonated with. And so I sat on the throne, and immediately I was next to Jesus, you know, and he reached down with his right hand, and he held my hand, my left hand, and I just felt connected to him. And this was, you know, an amazing experience. And eventually I came out of the experience. I'm back at my desk and was like, whoa, what was that? So I quickly journaled it down, what had happened. And then Next day, I got into my office, sat at my desk waiting for this portal to open, and it just didn't. And I'm like, why? I want more of this. You know, if this is real, this is possible, I want more. But God had to prepare me for that. So over the next 18 months or so, I went through various things where God, I guess, was getting my heart right. I had some more experiences with God in intimacy and going deeper into love. And then he spoke to me about doing a 40-day fast. And I just said, yeah, I'll do a 40-day fast. I'd never done anything more than a 4 or 5 day fast before. So, but I said, yeah. That was August 2010. And I went into the fast. Before I went into it, I had a message, a prophetic word written, sent in a letter from a friend of mine. And I went into this letter, and it said, the first thing it said, I have seen your heart. And I thought, well, if this is real, then my heart is to go back into the experiences I've had before in heaven, and I want more of that. And then it said, a door will open for you and you'll be able to enter into where you've been before. And I knew that was God. So I went on the fast. For the first 18 days, it was like I couldn't enter into that, but I had downloads and downloads and downloads of teaching from heaven, which I was like, really wasn't that bothered about, to be honest, because it was like, I want to go into heaven. I don't want to just have teaching. I've been teaching my whole life, but I'm still using that material even today because it was revelation. But then on day 19, I'm lying on the sofa in the window and I just go into that realm. And first thing the Father did, well, Jesus initially met me. He gave me a quantum physics lesson, talked to me about frequency and harmony and vibration and string theory and, you know, quantum physics and sort of quantum entanglement and tunneling. And I'm like, and I'm a scientist from biochemistry background, but I didn't really like physics. It was sort of too theoretical for me. I like doing things. But I guess, you know, God knew what he was doing because he opened up a whole realm of how the spiritual realm actually works. You know, how do we connect to the spiritual, which is unseen, and how can we be local and non-local? Because quantum physics says that you can be in two places at once. You know, you can be connected, you can be entangled, and you can, some of us is in that realm even now, being energized and coming back into this realm. So I sort of got it, but then it opened up just amazing experiences of heaven, you know, the waterfalls of heaven, the garden of God, you know, all sorts of amazing things, the judgment seat, going into the fire of God's presence, going to the throne of grace, engaging the river of life. Fantastic experiences which just took me deeper and deeper into God. And then one day Jesus came up to me after probably about 10 days of having these experiences every day, came up to me and said, you've got father wounds. And I started to, well, no, I don't. I've dealt with my father issues because I didn't have a good relationship with my dad. He didn't really know how to love me. He didn't express love in any real way. So I was sort of lacking in that whole area. But over the years, God had sort of broken down some of the barriers. And I'd had experiences of him loving me, and I knew him more as dad. But this went to a whole different level. And I just said, okay. And I looked down, and I had this big scar over my heart, a big scar tissue. And Jesus said, do you want the Father to heal you? And I said, yeah. And the Father came. He looked me directly in the eye and he just said, I love you. And he said, I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you. And every time he said it, a bit of the scar tissue was removed until after about 45 minutes Earth time, it all gone. And it opened up a whole different connection of relationship with God. And God showed me the throne of God and the different governmental aspects of heaven. I was introduced to angels, the seven spirits of God, the four faces of God, all of the things which are in the Bible, but most people just think are a bit weird. But I encountered them firsthand. I went into the courts of heaven, you know, where there are assemblies and where there are angels and where the elders are and all different types of things like that. Had amazing experiences and came out of that experience and continue to have experiences like that every day. entering into that realm, going deeper, but also learning to engage God on the inside, because God's in us. So realizing that we can invite him, where Jesus says, behold, I stand at the door and knock. He's not outside of us, he's inside us within our spirit, and he wants to fill us. So we need to open that door and let the rivers of living water flow. Otherwise, we just get a trickle flowing underneath the door, as in Ezekiel 47, where it talks about the temple and the flow. But once the door is open, the flow increases to ankle deep, knee deep, waist deep, until you're just flowing with it. And I learned to open that up and learned to engage with the Father there and Jesus and the Spirit, and learned then to engage my spirit, soul, and body, understanding how I'm wired, put together, the inner core of my being, that core center, where now I know more about that. I've engaged with the spirit gates and the soul gates and the body gates, but then I realized that I have energy gates within me that need activating. They're activated within the core of my being with rivers of living water flowing. That flow is what I now see as the Merkaba, which is translated in the Bible as chariot or heavenly chariot, but really it's a place within us that gives us access through portals into the realms of heaven and other places, but also is a communication where my soul and spirit can be communicating. And that was wonderful. And I continued to do that, started teaching people about it, had amazing encounters with it, but that was just the beginning. And in 2011, God spoke to me about entering the dark cloud. And I had some experiences in worship where I was in this darkness, but I wasn't afraid. And it was like, and I knew the Bible says that God hides in the darkness, within the dark cloud, because he wants to keep us safe from his presence when his presence is really strong. And so he eventually, God said, will you give me 4 months? I want 4 months of your time just to be with me. And I thought, wow, this is going to be amazing. 40 days changed my life. 4 months is going to be amazing. And, this was November 2011. And I came down early in the morning, got in my chair, just got comfortable, was starting to engage, and nothing. Black. Couldn't see anything, couldn't hear anything. And I'm like, what's going on? I thought this was going to be intimacy. I thought, well, I'm going to go deeper. And it was like, couldn't see anything, couldn't hear anything. And all I felt was God say, be still. Well, I couldn't be still. It's like everything in me and my soul just reacted. I needed to know, what were you doing? Why are you doing this? Why is it dark? Why can't I see? And I just questioned and didn't get any answers. And really, my soul was just out of control. Really, it was like I needed to know what was going on, so I felt safe. So I needed to be in control, basically. And God knew that, and God wanted to show me so much more, but couldn't, because of the mixture of the motives of my heart, in that I was getting my identity from what I was doing. And I was doing what God wanted me to do, but it was still me doing it was affirming my identity. So who was I if I wasn't doing it? Now I couldn't see and I couldn't hear and I couldn't engage. Well, who am I then? And so ultimately it got me to the point of surrender. And I chose to surrender. I got to the point where, okay, God, I trust you. I know you love me. I love you. I got to this point of total surrender. And then he separated my soul and spirit, because my soul was connected to my spirit to draw life from my spirit in independence. And he wanted me to be reintegrated and made whole. So he separated my soul and spirit, as in, reveal the thoughts and intentions or motives of my heart, as in Ephesians, I'm sorry, in Hebrews 4:12, I think it is. And it was like, oh, this is really difficult, and, 4 months, I had 4 months of that, and eventually got to that point where I gave up. I surrendered. He separated it, reintegrated me, connected me, and I felt so whole. And I woke up the next day, and then everything was back to normal. In fact, everything was beyond that. My spirit went into the realms of heaven with my soul. Up to that point, every time I went into heaven, I came back out of heaven, spirit and soul, because they were connected by a short connection. But then he connected me with a quantum entanglement, which means I'm instantly connected. So my spirit has remained in that realm ever since. I've been my consciousness of the spirit. My spirit is still within me, or the construct of my spirit, or where my spirit can dwell, or where God is within me, is in that place. But my consciousness in my spirit is in realms of heaven, and my soul can just go and join where my spirit is. Now, ultimately, over a long period of time, God deconstructed my thinking around a lot of things I believed, and showed me that I have abilities that are beyond what I could have imagined or thought. And now he was able to show me. So first there was non-linear thinking. You don't have to think in a linear way, that time is there to serve and we're not limited by time. Therefore we can contract and expand time. You know, we can go somewhere in 10 minutes when normally it would take 2 hours, or we can do something that takes 10 hours and it could be 10 minutes. It's like that became a reality. And eventually I learned to live in multiple places at multiple times, because we can be multi-dimensional. We don't have to be in 1 or 2 dimensions. We can live in multiple places doing multiple things, because God is everywhere and limitless. We're made in his image. So I learned more and more about sonship, who I am as a son of God, my position in heaven, my thrones in heaven, my authority in heaven, and also then how can I outwork that on earth. That took me beyond. In 2016, he started to deconstruct my mind. I was walking with him, and it was dark. And I said, "Where are we? I've never been in the dark with you." And he said, "We're in your mind." And I said, "Whoa, I can't see anything." He said, "Well, that's because there's not much light in here." And then I've got accustomed, and I could see a construct of how my mind was shaped. My thinking, my belief systems were all there, and they were held up by 9 pillars that he said, "I want to deconstruct your mind and remove these pillars so that you think the way I think." And I said, "Yes, I want that, but can you do it 1 pillar at a time?" Because I thought, if they all go, I don't know, will I lose my mind? I don't, where does this work? But he renewed my mind, and he took these pillars. There were 6 religious pillars. Started off with, evangelicalism, sola scriptura, Protestantism, Augustinianism, Hebrew, Greek thinking, and then a few sort of my scientific educational background, cultural relativism, scientific rationalism, and humanism. And he deconstructed them all bit by bit, but it was such a challenge, because you believe what you believe, you're programmed. And then the only way he could do it, he couldn't just try and change my thinking by telling me my thinking was wrong. He had to give me encounters that revealed my thinking was wrong, because the encounter didn't line up with what I believed. And I knew the encounters were with God, and therefore God was showing me what the truth was, and that my thinking was not true. So from 2016 onwards, there was just so much deconstruction. And one of the things the Father said, he said, "How much do you, of what you know about me, the Bible, Christianity, all of it has come directly from me, and how much of it has come from other people, from reading books, for doing your own study? How much came directly from me?" And I had to own up that not a lot of it had done. So he said, "I want to replace all that you've learned from other people with the truth that I'm going to teach you." Now that challenged and deconstructed so many of my belief systems about what God was like, that God was not angry. He was not going to punish me. He was a God of love. He wanted to bless me, but I'd been taught that God was angry and that we need to be appeased. We need to be obedient, and we need to be, full with duty and obligation and all that stuff. And he was deconstructing that. He says, "I don't want you to be obedient. I just want a relationship with you. Obedience is the law. You obey a law. You're not under the law. You're in grace." So he deconstructed my old covenant thinking, and broke down my understanding of obedience and duty and obligation, and basically fear, really, having this fear of God. And he revealed that, Jesus came to reveal what God was really like. And the God that I thought in the Old Testament isn't God at all. It was just their version of what they thought God was like, but they didn't know him. because they didn't have intimacy with him. They only had a mediation system where they had a mediatorial way of engaging with God. They didn't engage. They sent a priest, and he only engaged once a year. So there was this sort of disconnect. And I think there's so much mixture of covenants that we live in a new covenant, but a lot of what people do is living under old covenant rules and living under old covenant law. And we need to live in grace. We have limitless grace and triumphant mercy, and we're loved unconditionally, which truly starts to reveal who God really is. And he started to reveal himself in love, reveal what unconditional love really is. There are no conditions. If you put a condition on love, then it's not love. It's a reward for fulfilling an obligation or a duty or a condition. There's no conditions in love. And people will say, yeah, but God is love. Yeah, but he's righteous, and he's a judge, and he's this holy. And I said, well, yeah, of course he is, but that's not any different than love. Love is just expressed in those characteristics of God. That doesn't make him angry. It doesn't make him vindictive. It doesn't make him going to punish his children forever. So it deconstructed my whole understanding of hell. And God took me back, showed me that in the Bible, hell doesn't exist as a word. It's an English word, but it comes from a Germanic Norse root. And actually it's not there. And there are 4 words, but they're not hell as we know it in our traditional evangelical sense. But it does talk about Hades. It talks about Sheol, the grave, an unseen place, basically Hades. You're not seen after you die. And it talks about Tartarus, and it talks about Gehenna. And Gehenna was a physical place, which mostly Jesus talked about as what was going to happen to them at the end of their age. When Jesus said, in this generation, I'm going to come and I'm going to end this age. The temple's going to be destroyed. The whole system is going to collapse. If you stay in Jerusalem and you keep following that system, you're going to end up being destroyed along with it. So follow me and leave. And then he warned his disciples when certain things were going to happen, like armies were going to come and surround Jerusalem, run, get out, run to the hills. And history has it, I think Joe Cephas says that no Christians stayed there. They all left. They went up into the hill country of Pella, and they were all saved, physically saved. And salvation primarily is physical. The word sozo means physical. It means health, wholeness. It means everything in positive. But we've turned everything into some spiritual salvation, which relates to going to heaven when you die. Well, you don't have to wait before you die to go to heaven. You can engage heaven now. The door's open. Jesus is the door. The veil is torn. There's no limits to access, but we've been told you have to die before you go there. So most people don't think they could go to heaven because they think they have to die first, and they don't want to die. So they don't go. But actually, Hebrews says we can go and touch those things. We can go and engage those things. It's open. We can go into the heavenly tabernacle. We can go into the throne room of God. It says, come boldly to the throne of grace. Well, where's the throne of grace? In heaven. So come boldly with confidence. Come. We're invited to go. We're seated with Christ in heavenly places. But people only think of that in theoretical sense. But the reality is we've all got thrones in heaven that we're supposed to be seated on and ruling from as co-heirs of God's kingdom. So that opened up all sorts of potential issues, obviously, when you're sort of deconstructing that whole belief system, because people are very strongly believing in, eternal judgment and damnation and everything else. But God is not like that. Death is not the end of choice. If someone dies and not knowing Jesus, generally they get to an opportunity of accepting Jesus on their deathbed at the point of death when they're visited by Jesus the light. But also afterwards, if they choose to reject that, they go into the consuming fire of God's presence, and that fire is purifying and refining fire that will remove every obstacle or hindrance for them accepting God's love. And therefore choice continues. They have to come to the Father through Jesus, but they can after death, and there's nowhere in the Bible it says you can't. So that was a challenge. But over the last few years, I guess the restoration of all things has been a passion, that God is going to restore everything back to his original purpose and intent, and that includes everything that he's created. And Colossians 2 talks about all things were created by Jesus, for Jesus, through Jesus, and he has reconciled all things, the same all things that he created, he's reconciled through the blood of the cross. So for me, that means that everything will be restored ultimately when they come to a point of surrender. And Revelation 5 talks about those on the earth, under the earth, in the heavens, all singing praise to God, basically, voluntarily. You can't force praise. It's not praise. And that will happen, I believe, one day. So I believe in restoration. I've been involved in restoring a lot of different dimensional things and angelic beings, because God is love, and Jesus wants a restored relationship with all that he's created. And actually, our sonship relates to creation, in that Romans 8 talks about creation longing or waiting for the revealing of the sons of God, and that creation will be set free from its bondage to corruption into the freedom of the glory of the children of God, which is us, our identity, who we really are as co-heirs and co-creators with him. So that really is sort of a bit of a snapshot of my journey over the last number of years. So
yeah, that's fantastic. You tapped on a few things that I want to go a bit more in detail on, and you kind of ended right where I want it to start, which is dominion and mastery over creation, and even the ability to create. Could you share some of the revelation and stories that you have concerning that topic?
Yeah, I mean, I've believed that creation is sentient. It is aware, and even the planet itself is aware. There are elemental beings that connect us to creation, and they're created by God to be linked with us and creation. And they're also, even the trees, the whole earth is actually connected by a network of mycelium. There's a frequency it produces. At the core of the earth is sentient. I've engaged in a lot of activity with the earth itself, and with the nature, you could say, itself. Creation is waiting for us to become sons who have a mandate to bring God's dominion, God's kingdom. But it's a kingdom of love. It's not to dominate. It is not to domineer over, but it is to bring the kingdom of God, the dominion of God, the rule of God through us as sons to bless. So Adam and Eve were called to look after and tend the garden of creation. And the garden gave up its bounty and fruitfulness and all of that. And we lost that when Adam walked in independence. We lost that ability to connect. Well, God is restoring it. And he's restoring it in such a way that we will then begin to focus on bringing restoration in our relationship with creation, and setting creation free from its bondage to corruption and decay, which is sort of the laws of entropy, essentially. Well, those laws were not God's intention. Therefore, God wants to increase. So there's no end to the increase of God's government and peace. Okay. Okay, well, it looks like I've been sort of left on my own for a second. I'm not quite sure what's going on, but if it's continuing to record, then I'll continue to talk about creation and engaging with it. And I have engaged as a son with different aspects of creation, the earth itself, the solar system, which is designed to be in harmony with the earth. Therefore, the sun itself, the stars, the planets are designed to be cooperating in harmony with the earth. They bring about and produce frequencies which are designed to bring about an earth perspective, which actually is one which is harmonious and in resonance and in agreement, and therefore we supposed to live in an atmosphere where everything is unified and one. Okay, you're back there. Okay, I sort of carried on speaking, but hopefully it'll carry on. So just talking really about the connection we have with the solar system, the planets, looking to restore the relationship with the earth and the planets, harmony, union. They all have frequencies and purpose that are supposed to work together with the earth. But the earth is the central point because that's where the sons of God were to expand God's government from the garden to fill the earth and to fill the solar system and to fill the universe. But obviously Adam chose to go independently and walked away from that. Jesus came to restore that kingdom, sonship, governmental position, and now we are finding that we can connect to creation in very real ways. And there are elemental beings, the earth, the air, water, fire, which are designed to help us with our role in connecting to the earth and communicating with the earth. So you can communicate with nature, you can communicate with trees, you can communicate, and people do tree hugging and grounding, and they're beginning to discover that creation has a sentient connection. How can it long and wait if it doesn't know? Well, it does. It has a way, and we can connect with it. And as we learn to operate in a governmental way, which is loving and nurturing and caring for, then creation begins to respond to us. But humanity has stripped creation. They've stripped its assets. They've cut down all the trees. They've stripped out raw materials. We make everything from the earth, and that's not how it was ever intended. God wanted us to cooperate and work together. And there is a whole move that God is working to bring about that restoration of relationship. I've engaged the core of the earth, which has a function in producing the magnetic field around the earth and actually producing energy fields to keep the earth safe from radiation and things like that. And, but we've treated like under the earth as a negative thing. Well, that's where hell is or something, Well, actually, it isn't. It's a reality of a spiritual dimension where people go into God's love and presence. The core of the earth has a function and has a created function, and we can reconnect with it, as do all the planets. And all the planets have our personality, and they have purpose in God, and we can connect to them, as
Saturn,
well as other dimensions as well.
Right?
Yeah. So I've sort of learned to engage them, travel to them, sort of look to see about restoring their position and purpose, and the beings that have been responsible for them that also fell and became objects of worship, because most of the planets have been worshipped. The beings behind the planets have been worshipped, as gods, and even the sun worship, or, and the planets like Mars, the god of war, and Venus or Athena, the god of love and all of that. And there's a sense where it's all been corrupted, but God is wanting to restore everything and bring back harmony and balance, as within the rest of the solar system and the whole universe. And there's lots of portals out there within the constellations that connect up to other dimensions as well. And there are other dimensional realities and beings which also are looking for the sons of God to set them free and bring them into harmony and wholeness. So there's so much of which restoration is God's desire to bring it back to his original intention. But he is working to facilitate that with people recognizing their connection to creation, beginning to feel and sense that longing and that sort of bondage that it's in, and look to help to set it free. But we have to do things very differently than the way we've done it. The world has sort of been operating by profit and greed, and therefore everyone wants everything cheap, and they essentially abuse everything, really.
Mm-hmm.
So, over the last few years, I've been involved with groups of people who are involved in protecting the earth from external influences so that that restoration can take place and the reconnection to creation can take place. Mm-hmm. And there's an earth shield, a shield around the earth made up of people and light and the angelic field, and which God has been using to be a place of protection, but also a place of government, to look to reconnect to the earth itself.
Yeah. So, how would you say that, what would you say about the idea that our consciousness helps to shape creation?
I believe that's true. From a quantum physics perspective, the observer shapes reality. Your choices shape the reality around your life, and we have been given authority to choose. And to choose realities hopefully that align with the heart of God, that will bring about that restoration of things. But we need to be in tune with the heart and the mind of God, and therefore our consciousness needs to become a state of being and not doing. And a lot of independence from God and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is all about doing and position from doing, or identity from doing. And if we're going to know who we are as sons, then we need to know who we are as a being, who God made us to be. And that consciousness is then connected with the heart of God to begin to brood and begin to create, and then to choose realities that align with God, and to align with God's heart and with God's purpose. And we then become creative. And there is a place within a dimensional reality called the chamber of creation, in which light responds to God's voice to form reality. Actually, when we engage and speak with God's voice, because we come from God's heart, then we also can form reality. Now, I've done that lots of times on small things, in choosing realities around my life for things to manifest, favor and blessing, realities of being able to shift in time and space and things like that. But if we corporately come together with one mind and one heart and one purpose aligned to the heart of God, then our conscious choice will bring about restoration within creation, and will also bring about expansion. You know, there's no end of God's increase of God's government and peace, but it's peace. We don't do this by war or conflict. This is something about bringing peace and being peacemakers, which is a totally different dynamic to what, you know, we were taught in spiritual warfare and all those things. You know, I don't get involved in spiritual warfare because I don't need to fight against anybody. I have authority as a son of God. I can use that authority to restore and to offer restoration and to administrate love to bring about change and transformation. But definitely, we need to be aware of who we are, and then we need to learn that our conscious awareness is expanding the reality of who we are, so that we are aligned to who God says we are, rather than to who we've been made to be by the life we've lived. And we need to explore the vast sum of God's thoughts about us to explore what real reality is, to know the truth of that reality from God's perspective. And then when we speak with the voice of God, we are an oracle. We can speak with authority, and creation responds to us. Light responds to us. Light is living. When I engage the chamber of creation, I engage with a few people, Nancy Cohen and Justin Abraham and a few others. And we were engaging in this place, and I saw light just moving and swaying as the voice of God was spoken. And God spoke to us and said, name light. What is it called? It's living. It is my grace. It is the divine enabling power of God to form all reality. Name it. So we named it quantum lumens. I think Nancy Cohen chose that name, but we named it that, and we began to engage with light. And light is living, it's active, and it actually forms reality. That is quantum physics. It's not fantasy. Quantum physics says that when you choose a reality, all the other realities fade away, and then that one collapses. It's called popping a quiff, or collapsing the wave function to form reality. Now, there's what you can do around your own life, and we do it every time we do something. You create history. You form the reality by the choice. Now, most people choose out of what they've known from their past. So they keep perpetuating their own life. We need to choose out of God's heart to form a new future aligned to our destiny in God as sons of God, and choose realities which are God's realities. But we need to brood in his heart. We need to connect to his heart. Then we begin to speak with his voice. And as an oracle, light responds to us. But it will respond to a unified group of people who are one heart and one mind. If we're going to change the reality of the planet or the universe, we're not going to do that as an individual. We're going to do that together, having one mind, the mind of Christ, and operating in love and operating in rest, and not doing it out of wrong motives for position or power or greed or financial gain, but to bless. You know, we're blessed to be a blessing. And as sons, we're here to bring blessing to the whole of creation.
If you don't mind, could you share your story about the locked gate?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I was in New Zealand. I was speaking in Auckland um, with a group of people. I was talking about angels and my experience with the supernatural in that way, and how angels are there to help us and help protect us and guard us. And I was talking. No, it was a very, very rainy, windy, stormy night. And when I finished speaking, I was talking to people and chatting to people, and I was one of the last ones out. And when I got out, I saw that all the cars were lined up in the car park and the gate was shut. And I assumed that the caretaker had locked the gate, shut the gate. So I went up to the first car, who happened to be two ladies who had been invited by the lady who was hosting me. One was a Hindu and the other one was a not yet believer. And they'd been listening to the stories, and they looked at me. I said, "What's the real problem?" It's, "Oh, the gate's locked. We can't get out." And they sort of jokingly said, "Well, can you ask one of those angels you were talking about to open the gate?" So I instantly thought, "No, it's okay. I'll open the gate for you." And they looked at me as if I was mad. But I walked up to the gate, chose the reality that the gate would open. I opened the padlock without a key. It opened. I opened the gate and they all went out, because I didn't let what was the present reality affect what I knew. God didn't want all those people locked in, and we had to get the caretaker out, and then everyone was going to be late home, and it was late and dark, and so I chose that reality. And then the gate opened, the padlock opened. They tried it. Lots of people had tried it. It was locked, but I just opened it. Now I've done that sort of thing a lot in travel, and changing the course of plane flights and time of plane flight, all sorts of things. Whenever I felt that this was going to affect what God wanted me to do, I felt at liberty to choose a different reality. And then light responded, reality formed, and then I believe that everything that is possible exists as potential timelines. They don't exist yet because we've not chosen one. But when we choose one, that becomes reality. It's then history. Now you do that all the time. Whatever choice you make effectively becomes history, and you effectively form reality. But most people don't form a different reality. They just form the same reality over and over and over again. So I've learned to choose different realities, and I've learned to choose that if I'm not double-minded and I am aligned to the heart of God, then creation responds to me around my life. I can't change the planet single-handedly, but I can, with other groups of people in sonship, together with one heart, one mind, and one purpose, come into agreement with God for cosmic shifts to take place, for changes to take place. And those things are happening. There's amazing things happening. I've been legislating for the last couple of years in governmental groups. We've been going up into the heavens, going into the north, south, east, west gate, opening those gates, engaging the everlasting doors, connecting to other realities, to the solar system, seeing some amazing things happen. And one of the things we were legislating out of the west gate was the release of discoveries which were going to benefit mankind. But we wanted to legislate that these discoveries were going to get in the hands of those who were going to make them available for everybody, and they were not going to use them for profit gain or exploitation, which is what's happened to a lot of discoveries in the past. Someone uses them to exploit other people, or they suppress them because they don't want free energy. They don't want those type of things. But there are things out there. So we've been legislating for that. And, in the last few weeks, been talking to a few people who are starting to see that form, with some Christian billionaires who are actually under the radar financing some of these discoveries in agriculture, in health, in energy, and they are there waiting for release. So that was pretty cool in terms of some of the realities we saw of releasing those things into our realm, out of the heavenly realms, to bring about positive good for mankind, for everyone, and free people from their bondage, really. Yeah.
What could you say to the idea that sound, light, frequency, energy, and vibration can be used to heal the human body? as far as like crystals and the right music, sound bowls, things like that?
Yeah. I mean, years ago, I would have said you're crazy. I would have had no knowledge of that whatsoever, really hadn't any thought about it. But I was in Seattle, I think in 2016, and I was doing a conference, and there was a group of people there, and they were selling crystal bowls. And I thought, well, this is weird. But they did a workshop on it, and I felt the frequency as they were playing it, and then they gave me a bowl as a gift, and I started to learn to play it and just to, just go with the flow of my spirit and produce frequencies and vibrations. And I felt connected to it. And then God began to show me how my intentions could be focused on the waves of those frequencies, the energy, because you can feel it. You can feel it touch your body, even if you're not touching the bowl or a tuning fork or other types of things that generate frequencies. Rife machines generate certain frequencies that have properties to be able to heal or restore or free you from certain things that are in your body. But I started to pursue it, and I bought a set of bowls, colored bowls with the notes of, A to G, and started to use it. And I then, in a meeting, I would say, okay, I believe God wants to release healing in this meeting. So I'm going to release that intention. As I play this bowl, I want you to engage with the frequency and the intention for healing and receive it. And then you'd have testimonies of people. One guy who was numb all the way down his body, one side, from addiction over years, completely healed just by receiving that intention in the sound. So a lot of that took place. And then friends of mine, I've got a good friend, Lindy Strong from Marketplace Ministries in the UK. She then started to really work on that. She got bowls. She then started to use other therapies, light therapy, gem therapy, Rife machines, plasma generation, all sorts of different things to bring healing to people with cancer and other quite major issues. And they've seen a lot of really good success for that. And she's used those things herself in her own healing journey. So I totally believe that there are wellness centers springing up all over the place where people are using these technologies. Beamer machines, which help with circulation. There's lots of different technologies out there, which you can use to focus energy. Now, I know certain frequencies have certain properties. 528, I think, is a healing frequency. 703, I think, is a restoration frequency. There's different things, but the intention is really what's the important thing. You have to focus your intention. The planet itself has a frequency, Schumann's frequency. Mm-hmm. And that's begun to spike in higher frequencies over the last number of years. And interestingly, that frequency is monitored. We were doing a conference in Colorado Springs in which we were doing some restoration issues. And as we were doing it, someone was watching the monitoring of that Schumann's frequency, and it was spiking. Normally it's around, I don't know, 13, 14 hertz or something. It was spiking up to 30, double. So I know there is a powerful effect. Now, ultimately, I believe that we can generate those frequencies using our own consciousness to choose health and wholeness and immortality. I've not been sick for years and years, and I choose to live in health, and I believe in immortality. I don't use those machines or technology myself because I've learned to focus my own intention to produce my own frequencies in my thoughts to do that. But I believe they're there. And I do believe they're very positive things. And a number of my friends, Nancy Cohen has got a wellness center in Colorado Springs. They're using a lot of that technology to bring healing and health. I think they've been working with the military to do help with PTSD and trauma release and other things. So it's a very positive thing, which a lot of people say, oh, that's all new age, you're using new age stuff. Well, new age just hijacked what was, as Nancy Cohen says, the righteous real. We have the righteous real. They just hijacked some of it and used it for their own ends. It doesn't mean actually that there isn't truth in it. People like Einstein said that the medicine of the future will be energy, will be frequency. Tesla also had a lot of things about frequency and vibration. And, we are just energy. You know, our body has a frequency. We are vibrating at a particular frequency. If we carry low frequencies, then we're susceptible to sickness and disease. Therefore, our thinking is what produces those frequencies. So if you're in negative thinking and you've got toxic thinking and you're angry or you're resentful or you're bitter or you're negative, you lower your body frequency and open yourself up to disease. If you carry love and joy and peace and, you know, kindness and goodness, and you focus on that, that raises your frequency and keeps you in health and wholeness. So I do totally believe and accept that these things are there. I ultimately think we can live in health through our own consciousness, but on the way, these things are definitely stepping stones towards that conscious reality of life and health and immortality.
Yeah. I have one more question before we start to close.
Okay.
Could you talk about ecstasy?
Ecstasy,
or ecstatic union.
yeah, excellent. Rather than the drug, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, ecstasy is a way of expressing the bliss of intimacy with God. And when I'm face to face, heart to heart, mind to mind, in the light of God's presence, I'm become one with Him. I'm so connected to Him that I feel totally loved, totally accepted, and I'm living in a dimensional reality in which I feel all those senses heightened. So they are connected to God. So God is vibrating at a frequency. He is light. He is pure, ultimate light, the fastest speed of light there can be. And he is vibrating. If you come close enough to him, you will begin to vibrate or resonate and come into an alignment, which is entrainment. And you can see this in musical instruments. You pluck a guitar string and you bring another guitar, and its complementary string will start to vibrate even though you don't touch it. That is sort of entrainment. And we can be entrained into God's presence, and we then can vibrate with the frequency. So we become in harmonious union and oneness with him, in which there is a state of bliss or being, which is total, absolute peace, rest, love, you know, all those things rolled up into one, in which you just are. It's a state of being. And it doesn't mean that you have to outwardly necessarily be ecstatic and, you know, doing all that stuff. Some people do respond physically to it, you know, and I have responded physically, and I feel sometimes a weight of God's presence, and you feel quite heavily connected to God, you know. But you know, it can be just an internal thing in which that emotions and your whole being is just connected. You're living in that state of bliss, you know, that oneness and union with God, one heart, one mind, one purpose. Whoever's joined to the Lord, it says, is one spirit with him. I think it's 2 Corinthians 6:17. Whoever's joined to the Lord is one spirit with him. And that is intimacy. That is being joined. That is joined at a level which is equated to man and wife being in union. Now, it's not a sexual thing, but it's on that type of intimate level where you become joined in one. Then you are joined in one spirit. Therefore, there's a level when you're one spirit and in that joined union that is ecstatic, but not necessarily sort of what you would think gifts of the spirit ecstatic. It is beyond that. It goes higher than that. It goes deeper than that, and takes you into a sense of pure love, you know, absolute, pure, unconditional love, in which you are just completely cocooned within that love, and you are in a state of loved. You're being loved. And that is that higher state of union in which God is love. God is light. Light vibrates. So you are becoming light because your spirit is a light being. That is the join in the union of light. But we resonate with God's light and we become like him. He doesn't sort of become like us, although Jesus obviously took on the form of a man and became us to bring us into that relationship with God. Now, what we behold, we become like. So the more we behold the face of God and look into the eyes of God, the more we become like him. And that means we become attuned or aligned or entrained to his mind, to his thoughts. Therefore, we begin to know him at another level, and then we begin to know ourselves at another level.
That's awesome. Well, Mike, before we go, could you pray us out?
Sure. I mean, yeah, I just encourage people just to close their eyes right now. And I just want to encourage you just to come to that place of rest. Just begin to fix your eyes and your thinking, slow down your mind, your breathing, and just begin to fix your eyes on God. He is light. He is love. Just begin to be still. And be still and know God's love. Be still and know God as love. Be still and know God as joy and peace. Just be filled with love. Let love overshadow you. Let love rest upon you. Let love fill you. Be cocooned in unconditional love. So you truly begin to know who you are. Just rest in that place. Engage with God every day without agenda and just come into his presence. Allow love to infiltrate your life, fill you, change you, transform you, and bring you into the true reality of who you are as a son of God. Just stay in that place, rest in his love, and enjoy his presence. And he will transform you and change you into that image where you become like him. Okay. All right.
Awesome. Thank you.
Awesome.
Before we officially close out, where are some places where people can connect with you and find your resources? I know you have several books out right now and several programs out.
Yeah, 3 books out. One, my testimony, my journey beyond. Second book about the restoration of all things, and then the third book about the eschatology, the restoration of all things, or how that works out in practice. But I'm also writing. I got 6 or 7 books coming out on Sonship and the Sun's Arise series. But you can connect through Patreon. I've got a Patreon page. I do a monthly teaching series. I'm doing unconditional love at the moment. There are 3 different levels of that. You can do a one-on-one with me if there's a slot available, or you can do ask me a question, or just generally just tune in once a month and get linked to resources. We have a blog, Sons of Issachar blog, in which the sort of teaching has been put down, broken down into bite-sized chunks, and for those who like reading. And we have the Engaging God program, which is a subscription program. It's not expensive. I think it's probably £12, probably about $15-16 a month, and then that you've got access there to teaching, probably 300 or 400 teaching sessions, video, audio, PDFs, and also mentoring, which you can become part of a mentoring group. That's Engaging God, which is eg.freedomarc.org, and you can go there, and there's lots of free resources, but you can also sign up to that program and take it at your own pace. It's a self-monitored process, a journey of discovering intimacy from first steps, learning how to hear God's voice, engaging your spirit, training your senses, and then engaging into the heavenly realms and sonship. It's all there.
Well, Mike, thank you again for joining us here today. This has been fantastic. Well, I guess this concludes this episode of The Inner. More to come.
Okay, you're welcome.